incredible panel discussion it was on esports investment opportunities. Get in the game. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now for the next session on the World Esports and Gaming Summit, we've got a workshop by GScience. Well, GScience workshop, this workshop is in partnership with Semper Fortis, and it aims to provide an in-depth look at the health and wellness sector within esports. Well, the esports teams are maturing and are adding major pieces such as mental coaching, nutritionist, physiotherapist, and top-level peak performance trainers to their team. GScience is at the cross-section of this and brings a level of professionalism to the industry. Please join us now for this great deep dive into the world of esports athletes and their peak performance and training. Joining as the moderator, CEO of Semper Fortis is Kevin Soltani, our Jamie and Ryan from GScience. So thank you so much, Kevin, Jamie, and Ryan for joining us. With this, let's start with the GScience workshop right now. Over to you, gentlemen.
Welcome everybody again to another session at the World Esports and Gaming Summit 2021. It is in Singapore based, but we are coming to you virtually from around the world. We do say Singapore because on better days, we would have been in Singapore together. And I'm sure the next edition we will be back together. But for now, we are broadcasting live or pre-recorded from depending on wherever in the world you're watching at this moment. For this last session of the day, it is a very intense but near to my heart session because of its importance to the industry. Being the last session, we wanted to keep it a workshop style. Originally, we were going to have it be on a second stage, but we wanted to have all main stagers have access to this. So we've brought it back to the main stage. We're going to end strong today. None other than my good friends at GScience. Before I introduce the two gentlemen joining me today, I want to tell you a little bit about health, wellness, peak performance in esports and let these gentlemen take over on the professional side. Look, all things in esports are becoming the same way or going the same way as traditional sports. That's the same as media rights, the way ticketing packages go, merchandising, jersey sponsorships. So why is it so far-fetched to believe that esports teams should also have the mental and health preparations that sports fans, sports teams do? The same way Ronaldo gets ready, has his nightly, daily massages, has the physio come through, has the mental coach sessions, and the chef that does his entire, or the nutritionist rather, that does the entire plan that's given to the chef. Why is it so far-fetched that esports teams can't do this as well? Well, guess what? If you didn't know already, a lot of esports teams, at least the top tier ones that want to be the best, are hiring companies, and they're hiring companies like GScience. And GScience's job is to figure the problems that they just don't seem to know how to solve out. I'm going to let the boys tell you some amazing statistics, but I'm very honored to be here today with Jamie and Ryan from GScience. They're not only good friends within the industry, but they've done fantastic work for our team, Semper Fortis Esports, and I'll let them get into it as well. We're going to be going through a bit of slides together, and then we'll go through a Q&A afterwards with some of the questions that we've gotten together from online, and around our communities. And as well, we'll go and get through some questions that I'm going to have on their presentation moving forward. Ryan, welcome. Jamie, welcome. Thanks for being here today with us at the summit, and bring us home. Bring us home with some health and wellness, peak performance, and esports guys.
Kevin, what an introduction. Thank you very much for having us on. We're super excited to be here, and hopefully we can give you an insight into what it's like to work in the industry as esports performance coaches. So my background is in sport and exercise science. I studied at Loughborough University, and that's where I had the pleasure of meeting Jamie. We then decided to set up a company called GScience. I'm the acting CEO and co-founder of GScience, and I'll pass you on to Jamie.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, thank you, Kevin, for the invite, and co-founder, head of science and performance coach, and like Ryan, background in sports science, and as Ryan said, had the pleasure of meeting Ryan there as well. So that's where our background comes from.
And before I start up the slides and let you boys at it, I gave quite a ruckus introduction, if you will, to the comparison of sports. And I tend to get in trouble doing that a lot when I do that for esports because of my passion for the industry, I do see it as so one-to-one, but I do see obviously esports is a long way to go. Before we let you guys at your methodology and stuff, is that comparison right for me to do as it pertains to health and wellness and peak performance?
Yeah, Kevin, I think you highlight some really interesting points. Now, if we take it back and look at the industry from about 2 years ago when we first started off, Jamie and I could clearly see that esports was following the similar blueprint to that of traditional sports in terms of, increases in participation, increase in competition, that search for the competitive edge. But the key difference that we've seen was that if you look at traditional sports, they have the full support team behind the team, as we like to call it. They have their nutritionists, their psychologists, their strength and conditioning coaches. But when you looked at esports, they didn't. And that was clearly evident when you've seen, players burning out. You've seen the high levels of poor physical and mental health. You could see the cocktail of problems that was occurring because you put these young men and women in an environment where it's high challenge. And some of the times they're going from playing in their bedroom at the age of 16 to being thrown on a main stage in front of millions of people at the age of 18. And it's no wonder that we're seeing all of these problems. And I think what we really need to focus on is how back then there wasn't that amount of support, but now we're starting to see, as you said, Kevin, more of the top teams starting to invest in health, wellness, and performance. So when you say you get in trouble for comparing the two, look, I think at the end of the day, there's so many similarities, and there's so much we can learn from working in esports from the traditional sporting template. But the key thing we must always understand is that esports athletes are cognitive athletes. We're not asking them to jump and sprint. We're asking them to be better in game and be better athletes in terms of how they approach their in-game performance.
Well, I will say, a big yet, right? Because with that big yet, as soon as those VR headsets come on and the haptics with the gloves come on, your jobs over at GScience just got a little bit more intricate because now you're going to have to mix the physical and digital. But I'll leave that for you guys to explain in your methodology. I don't want to take up our precious workshop time because I do want you guys to dive right into it. I've shared the screen for you. Give me a thumbs up if you got it on your screen, ready to go. Guys, I'm going to be a fly on the wall, but I do want to jump in and ask some questions. So I'll interrupt from time to time, but please get at it, everybody. This is GScience, performance enhancement coaching for the esports industry.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thanks,
Kevin. So we'll start off with what actually is esports performance coaching. So for anyone that doesn't actually know, so what we actually do at GScience, we provide esports health and performance coaching to elite professional esports teams, content creators, and gamers themselves. But what that actually looks like, so imagine all of the things that a traditional sporting athlete would have access to. Think about your sports psychologist, think about your strength and conditioning coach, your sports nutritionist, your sleep expert, your eye health expert. We provide a holistic package to ensure the optimal health and performance of an esports athlete. That is it in a nutshell. And going on to our mission, so why did we actually set up GScience? So the real foundation of GScience was, at our core, is all about solving problems that esports athletes face. And as we mentioned, going back, looking into the industry about 2 years ago, Jamie and I could see that there was a massive issue. I would actually say a health crisis when it comes to the physical and mental health of gamers, not only competitive athletes at the elite level, but also recreational gamers as well throughout the industry. So our founding promise was to really tackle this health and well-being crisis and to empower gamers through education and through the tools to better take care of their physical and mental health. And what that actually means is that by investing in your health and well-being, that also leads to improvements in in-game performance.
So Ryan, I'll just take over from you here in terms of the team that we have. So it was really important when developing GScience that we built a multidisciplinary team from all areas. And as Ryan's just put there, we brought in people from psychology, from nutrition, from the kind of performance coaching, like exercise, improving those sort of areas and bringing them together to all work as one team, as opposed to what the kind of traditional model or what we kind of came into when we came into esports and gaming was, where you hire one practitioner to help you overcome a problem. Whereas with the kind of team that we're building and trying to implement into high performance teams is bringing everyone from different disciplines together to work together and use data, use different insights and make decisions about teams and players. So we've built the team up. It originally started with Ryan and myself, and we brought on Dr. Kate O'Keefe, who can't be with us today. But she's an absolute rock star when it comes to performance psychology. You've got the likes of Tristan Kennedy in terms of being our head of nutrition, who also works with Conor McGregor. So our teams are in very good hands when it comes to those sort of things as well. The important thing to say for anyone is that for Ryan and myself, it wasn't really all plain sailing when we got into this. And as Ryan kind of alluded to, we got into the space because we wanted to help people and use the knowledge we had as coaches and also playing at a fairly good level as well. We knew that we could use that to help the industry progress, and we knew that we needed the best people in order to do that. So that's why we built that team. But when we first started out around 3 years ago, that we had to work with amateur teams, we had to do things for free and really get our hands dirty. And it's great to see now that big teams and big orgs are investing money into this because they are starting to see the fact that there is a return on investment. And I do think this does come back to what you were saying, Kevin, as well, from the kind of traditional sports scene where teams, for example, in Premier League football, where you have teams investing millions of pounds in looking after their players because they understand the cost of not doing it, which is really, really interesting. And we've progressed to get to where we are today by refining our methodology, which, to be honest with you, there isn't really any kind of one fits or like route to go with regards to esports performance coaching. And that's what we've been, as I said, refining over the last couple of years and bringing in people to help us do that. And I think teams and orgs are starting to realize that it can be positive. And it's really good to see that it is kind of heading in that direction as well. But definitely quite a bit to go in terms of getting everyone on board.
Guys, I'm going to jump in here with a question about the team because I am familiar with your team doing some work together. And for those who may not know, and I did allude to this in the beginning, GScience has worked with Semper Fortis Esports, our esports team. So Semper Fortis Esports owns an esports team in Rocket League, and now we've added a few other titles. But for the purposes of our Rocket League team, I've been very familiar with some of these names that we see down here. And I want to ask, when you have such a conglomerate of professionals on a team like this, how important is it for individually, because as we see through the titles, individually, everyone is a rock star and could have their own version of their own doctor's office, or their own health performance office or nutritionist office or anything. But in esports, we go farther together and you go faster alone, right? That's a common phrase, and it's no more important than in esports, and no more important than subsectors such as yours. I've said the word important now 10 times, but how important is it to have, look at those names and look at those titles, and each one is a piece of the pie that is the foundation to this beautiful building, which we call peak performance. And just to note for the listeners out there, we did lose Mr. Tristan about 2 months ago because he was training Connor and was just too busy for us Rocket Leaguers. So we understood that one. We understood Tristan, but that was a pretty cool story to tell around town. But yeah, getting back to it, you guys have a nice building blocks in each one of these names. It's how important is that for the esports industry and its professionalism to have a good team like this?
I'll take this one, Ryan, if you don't mind. Yeah, Kevin, to answer your question, I think it's really important. And I think, as you said, you've got the rock stars there in terms of their qualifications, there's experience in both esports and traditional sports. But the important thing is that, you have those individuals there that give greater visibility in what they're doing. So you might have someone that is the expert in psychology, for example, and then you might have the person who's the expert in recovery or sleep actually come in and give that other person advice about what they're not seeing. So it's a visibility thing as well, in terms of the whole team working as a cog together. And it's not necessarily, oh, I'm the expert in psychology, I only focus on that. Everyone will contribute in terms of what they're seeing and use that in order to kind of progress the team and take them closer towards the goals. So that's a massive benefit of having a multidisciplinary team. You just get to see so much more in terms of what's actually going on.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's paramount.
Amazing.
And I think, yeah, just to touch on who we've actually worked with and what success we've had. So, our practitioners, we have scouted them across the traditional sporting industry. And one of the key things that we really needed to do early days was to select the right people who were open-minded. You would not believe, Kevin, the amount of traditional sports people who kind of just laugh at esports and don't really see esports athletes as athletes. They don't have an understanding of what it takes to be at that elite level, nor do they respect the grind that goes in to stay at that elite level as well. So I think one amazing thing about our team as well is their willingness to learn, their willingness to acknowledge that they're novices in this area when it comes to esports and gaming, and also their willingness to go away and actually understand gaming terminology. What does a clutch mean? What does it mean to gank someone? What does it mean to do whatever? And actually being able to speak the language of gamers. I think that's so incredibly important. And instantly there's a better connection, rapport built between the practitioner and the gamer, and anyone who works within sport or within coaching. That coach-athlete relationship is so critically important. So yeah, this is just a quick overview of the experience that some of our practitioners have. To mention there, Jason Cowman, who's one of our advisors as well. He's head of athletic development at Irish Rugby and helped Leinster Rugby, if anyone's into rugby here listening, win their 3 Heineken Cups. So he knows a thing or two about optimising human performance. So we really have tried to cover all bases, and it's been a phenomenal experience for myself and Jamie as well, who are still very young in our own coaching career, to have veterans around us to help, really find that unique balance in the team.
I think just jumping in there as well, Ryan, I think one of the most enjoyable things for us is actually educating those people from traditional sports into esports and seeing them gradually turn and being like, oh yeah, I can actually see that now, and getting to where that stage where they're fully converted and being like, why didn't I see this before? That's actually a really enjoyable thing for Ryan and myself, because when we first came in, we're like, right, how do we do this? And it's exactly the same for those individuals that have never been exposed to it before. So yeah. I think we get a little bit of a kick out of that in terms of taking people to that level as well.
And Ryan, I'll tell you, this past week, don't quote me on the name of the newspaper, but the Times, or one of the major ones. I'm new to London, everybody. I'm from Los Angeles, so one of the major ones, and I have a clipping of it because our chairman sent it to me, and then I went and found it and I clipped it because I like to keep these moments in history. And it said that the rugby league is thinking about going into esports through a competitive game such as the FIFA series. So first they'll build the game in 2023, if I'm not mistaken, and they want to go straight in for the purposes of esports. They did write E-sports, so that really pissed me off, but I got to say that they're trying. They're trying.
That's an instant red flag, Kevin, if someone's
I know. They're trying. They're trying.
We could have a workshop on that in itself, so we'll play that one down.
But nobody more important than rugby players for health and wellness and performance, because of the nature of their business and the severity of the physicality. But then you take that into the esport, it's going to be very interesting for me because, and you guys, it is very interesting actually, because that everything from the way and the amount of pressure they put on the controller and they move the button, and all of a sudden you got rugby. These kids are going to be destroying controllers to want to score goals. So again, you guys have more work coming up your sleeves,
I think it's good though, Kevin, because for us, in terms of people like that coming into the space, it's a role model where you have like stars coming into the esports space, and you have players which you're familiar with as well, Kevin, in terms of some of your young lads, is using those people from rugby, from football as role models to say, guys, look, these guys are doing it. You look up to these people, and I think it's so important that we have that transition from traditional sports into esports to kind of professionalize the industry. It's only going to be positive.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of my players the other day, not one of ours on Rocket League that you've worked with, or else you'd go crazy. One of the boys was asking him, he was kind of knelt down like this, and he's kind of like, what's wrong? And he said, what do you mean? He's like, you look like you're in pain. He's like, I am. He's like, well, what's wrong? He's like, everything. So, these
quite
kids,
familiar statement, Kevin.
They have nowhere to look, so they just say everything. And I said, is it the lower bag? Is it the right side? Is it? He's like, it's everything, mate. So take us into your methodology about how you guys, get after the coaching side, and then also, you guys are mind, body, soul kind of, mind, body, spirit, I'll say, because The spirituality may not in the pure sense of the term come in spirit, but mental coaching as in manifestations, visualization, winning, and positivity. That may not be a course that they take. It's just a natural thing that comes with mental coaching and peak performance training. So take us into the eyes behind the scenes of what GScience rolls up their sleeve, and what do they do on a day-to-day for the teams?
Yeah, no, look, Kevin, you're totally right. It is a totally holistic approach, and there's so many different pillars of performance that you need to consider to get someone into that zone of optimal functioning or optimal performance. So in terms of how we actually work and what the methodology is, as you're aware, Kevin, when we start with the team, we start with an initial health and performance audit. We really need to understand, what are the key challenges that player or that team is actually facing. And once we have a better understanding of their key challenges, we start to better understand what is their familiarity or education level when it comes to health and performance coaching. So we understand where to start. And then really after that, we look at each individual pillar of our model, and we will do an assessment individually, and then we'll start layering up our actual training programs around that. One of the key things that we focus on is taking a human-centered approach, and you're probably wondering, what does that actually mean? I think it's super important to understand that the gamer has to be at the core of this model, that we build the infrastructure and support systems around them. One of the things I like to always say is, without the gamers, you wouldn't have esports. So therefore, we should really be prioritizing their health and well-being first, their needs first, because the infrastructure around esports is built on them being able to show up and perform as the quote-unquote asset. So we believe strongly in prioritizing the gamer first. So what we do then, Kevin, is, or sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, no, it's a thought, but I think it bugs us all, and it's important for the listeners to hear this, for those that are wanting to get in the industry or that are already in the industry and frustrated about certain things, is that is the esports industry, are we not too early? Again, let's take our performance wellness cap off and put our business team owner cap on. Let's go full commercial talking here, capitalism, because that's how these teams survive. As the CEO of G2 famously said, I can't pay my kids in Pringles. I can't pay them in Red Bulls. I got to pay the bills, and they cost a lot of money. So are we not too early in the entire scope of esports for teams that are kind of middle tier, that really do have to watch their burn rates and things like that to really care about the longevity of an esports player? How many contracts do we have that are more than 2 years, 3 years maximum? How many times do we have an esports player that signs a 12, 10-year contract that is now so famous in baseball and football because they're saying, you know what, screw the contract. Let's just get this guy, whoever the quarterback is, for 12 years, hit or miss, good or bad, failure or up or down. And I'd like to see more of that in esports, but at the same time, what's in it for the teams to invest in the player's longevity if the player himself or herself doesn't care?
Yeah, Jimmy, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think that the difficulty at the moment, Kevin, is the fact that we don't have hard data in terms of the actual cost of not doing it. That's the problem that we have. If you look at the Premier League, for example, you have lots of data around the cost of injury. So if you're looking, I think it was last year, the annual salary cost due to injury was 197 million, which really does start to put things into perspective for you. But unfortunately, we don't have that in esports. So it's difficult for org owners, for investors to kind of see the return on investment.
Right.
But when you start to change the perspective about how you look at things, for example, with Dota 2 I think it was the 2019 international, the difference between first and second place was $11 million. When you start to think about that, and you start to think about, for example, what's the difference between my player getting a good night's sleep before they play in the most important game of their life? What's the difference between 6, 7, 8 hours sleep? And how does that affect their reaction time? We know fatigue and sleep has a serious effect on cognitive performance. So when you start to bring those points up to org owners and investors, they're like, oh yeah, I didn't think of it like that. So I think it's really just a language change in how we're having those conversations. And it starts with things like this, where people start to get their eyes open about, oh yeah, this is actually a big issue that we need to be addressing. So I think it's just a perspective thing, to be honest with you, Kevin.
Right.
And I think on the back of that, Kevin, as well, health and wellness and performance is only one core component of what makes a successful team and organization. And also, Jamie and I, it's not our expertise or field. We're not team org owners ourselves. So understanding the nuances of how them organizations work is obviously not for us to speak about. But I think it's like anything. If you invest in your people, it'll pay dividends in the long run. And I think as well, if you actually care about building something that's going to stand, if you look at the dynasties that have been built, like the Astralis CSGO team, or even in Call of Duty, for example, you need to invest and support around them individuals to maintain optimal performance over a long period of time. And look at any of the great sporting teams, even the All Blacks, if you look at their performance philosophy, you know, they have the elite in there coaching the team behind the team, as I always say. So we talked about the blueprint traditional sports. There's a reason why, you know, all them elite teams at the top have athlete monitoring systems, have full, you know, performance staff. And I think that if you don't do it, you're going to be falling behind. But I also, you know, cognizant of the fact that certain teams in that, say, you know, semi-professional, the amateur league, may not have a budget for this stuff, but there's still ways that you can still educate and support your players through materials, you know, through attending talks like this to get insights and upskilling. But for the big teams now at the top, I think if you're not doing it, you're missing out and you're going to fall behind the curve.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I'll let you get back to the methodology there. But the reality is that, and I know you guys have seen this statistic. It's been about 2 years now. I'm sure it's updated, but it shows when you practice for 2, 3, 4 to 6 hours, what is the curve of a cognitive feedback, you know, ability to reciprocate the click. How quick is the click after 3, 4, 5, and 6 hours? And around the 4-hour mark, it tanks. And no matter what, you will not play as well or click as fast as you did in the first 2 to 4 hour mark as in the 8 or 12-hour mark. So go ahead and play until 3 in the morning. Go ahead and do all of that. But if there's not a performance aspect behind you that's teaching you this or taking care of you in that 4th hour, had someone said, go take a nap, let me massage your hands, put your hand in the solution I sent you, and you'll be fresh to start again at 8 o'clock, go another 4 hours from 8 to 12 instead of killing, you know what I mean? These are the
100%.
kind of conversations that kids or young professionals are not having. But
Yeah.
please, you know, tell us about, you go through the mind, you work on the body, and then we have the craft. Let's be honest, how difficult has COVID been not having the human to human touch for that third bit, which is the craft and the body combined? Because I gotta believe that had you just get a hand on some of these players, you could shake the tree and do some wonderful things.
I wish, Kevin, I wish.
I know you, Jay. I know you, Jamie. You would turn them all into the buff guys, you know.
Well, I think it's twofold, to be honest with you. Like the positive is that I actually think a lot of players are more comfortable being online and doing things virtually because it's where they, you know, they do their craft. It's where they, you know, it's where they operate. So in that sense, I think it's been a bit of a positive. But you know, from our side of things, it's obviously a huge negative. With any of the teams and players that we work with, it's obviously more beneficial for us to be hands-on, working with them, talking to them face to face. I mean, I think it's been testament to the gaming community as a whole being fully online that we've been able to still keep going, which has been fantastic. But yeah, it's definitely had its drawbacks in terms of, you know, our ability to be as successful as we wanted to be. So yeah, it's twofold. But when it comes to the mind body craft side of things, just to touch upon that as well, Kevin, the really interesting thing about esports and gaming is that there's alternate ways to improve performance that you wouldn't necessarily get in traditional sports like football or rugby, for example. Like, you know, when would you think about optimizing someone's chair position to make them play better? Or when would you think about optimizing the room that they play in, for example, to, you know, allow more air into the room to increase the oxygen consumption? Like just little things that you wouldn't think about that are, you know, from a performance perspective, really interesting. And I think from myself and Ryan's experience over the last 3 years, going into teams and seeing them playing in rooms, in dark rooms, no windows, no ventilation. And in terms of, you know, I'm no expert in it. You need to get Kate in here to talk about it. She's the expert in psychophysiology, but just to see the effect that has is really interesting for all of us. And it's things that most teams and orgs just don't think about.
But, you know, there is something there, and I'll play devil's advocate here. Let's have some fun with it. Is that there is some there's some meaning to the madness, right? There's a phrase that we hear, there's a meaning to this madness, and that crazy is always not so bad. Crazy is good. And I'll tell you from, if I can compare, and I won't say names, a couple players that I work with, two of them on the same team, one of them works out, goes on hikes, clean eating, elderberry juice at night, the syrups in the morning, the whole nine
Sounds like
yards.
you, Kevin.
That's me for sure, but I'm trying to rub off on these kids. The second one, a mountain high of McDonald's and Burger King, dark, doesn't have a light in his room. I have never been in the room to even know if I should even go in there to clean it or not. But and he is the better player. He's the one with the more upside. He's the one that all the teams want. And there's a kind of something in that madness, because all he does is play. He does is play. Now, is this one, as the one that I'm saying is always plays, is he going to have the longevity of this one? We don't know. It's just that the sample size is so small. So for our listeners, and I want to keep it moving here, give us one tip, because I think it's very fair. Even if you're a workaholic like me, I'm not a gamer, but I am sitting behind this and I try to do the ergonomic chair thing. But give us something, and maybe you can dig deep in the team's basket of goods. What's something we should do when we're sitting too much behind a chair, looking at a screen too much? Is it that 20-20-20 rule, or do you got something better for us?
Look,
Ryan, you take this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. It's gonna be anticlimactic, and no one likes to hear this, but it isn't sexy. It's simple. It's doing the daily simple habits every single day, and I'm talking about get your physical activity in. Every hour
Just
to
get
2
up
hours.
is what you're saying.
Get up and move. Well, there's one study recently published that shows that if you get up and walk for 6 minutes every hour, it increases their cerebral blood flow by 30%. Now think about that improvement in in-game performance. And this is why we need to start thinking about, when we're doing our long day of scrims and grinding 8 to 12 hours, when are we taking them breaks? Because as you alluded to earlier, Kevin, we see this cognitive drop off, but how can we get that back up and maintain? So what's super exciting as a sports scientist here is that this is all new ground, and it's all novel, and we have the the beauty to be able to go in here and work with these athletes and collect data and test these methodologies to start creating optimal esports athletes. Another thing I will say as well, Kevin, and you've perfectly alluded to it, you have two individuals, could be completely different, right, and both be awesome players. Now, anything that we do is always individualized to that individual. And if I was speaking to the unhealthy individual, I'd simply ask, what's their why? Why do they live in that way? Maybe they believe that will lead to optimal performance in the long run, but how long can they sustain that for? And what's their quality of life outside of the game? I know if I was eating McDonald's all the day and in a dark room for 12 hours a day, I don't know how that would affect my mental health and maybe even my relationships as well. So I think it's about finding that healthy balance between the two. And the jury's still out. Look, at the end of the day, they're players that have grinded their whole life, sacrificed everything, are burnt out, tired, stressed, but they're still at the top of their game. So we're not saying...
Jump in there quickly, Ryan. I think you touched upon a good point, is that I think, again, it comes back to perspective. For that player who's at the top, he's at the top. If his perspective is, I'm at the top, I don't need to improve, I've got here without it, that's the wrong perspective to have. It's reframing that in the sense that I've got to this point without even doing that. Imagine if I started doing these little things. That's the perspective for that individual, and that's the challenge. And if you can do that, then great, but it's not an easy one.
Yeah, there's a famous example more recently in League of Legends, which is the top game period for esports, but probably example wise for you guys, because it has the most hours played, the hardest grind, the biggest upscale in each level requires that much more compounding of your time. Nugiri, if I'm saying that correctly, I hope I am. Nugiri from Dem1 Gaming last year, I think he's on Fun Plus. Oh man, I'm gonna get butchered by my boys for this, but he was on Dem1 last year. I know. He would eat here. He would sometimes do, other things, and he would rarely get up, is what I'm trying to say. And he would just 24/7 play. He's one of the best players in the world. He's got one of the highest contracts in the world. He's on the best team in the world now. He's going to Worlds, which is going to be in Iceland. And everyone wants to know, is he going to be able to hold up? Because he's got glasses this thick you know, very, very thick glasses. And I'm not just saying that because I have a -375, so I'm damn near blind. But my point is that he's still the best.
Yes.
That's such a good example for our youth to know that. So when I talk to my younger boys, they're like, look, the Nugiri, you know, he's doing this and that. I wish that someone like Nugiri would come out and say, guys, I've now joined X and X Peak Performance, you know, Foundation. They're going to study my body. I've given my brain to be studied at the University of whatever, and they're going to help me, blah, blah, blah. I got this chair being made custom for me from whatever company. You don't hear this type of, but if LeBron James said it tomorrow, and he does say it, everybody buys that bed or that pillow or that ergonomic chair or whatever. So what's it going to take here? And I'll go straight into this slide. You know, psychology in the mind of the esports player is not just getting him ready for the game. It's changing the fact that we should be open to health and wellness in esports.
Yeah.
Well, I think I was going to say, Jim, if you don't mind me taking this one quickly, because Kevin, you made some really interesting points there. I think as a society, and I'm talking about not just esports here, I'm talking about globally as a society, I think given COVID, we've understood how vulnerable we actually are. And I think it's made a lot of people stop and realize how important their mental health actually is. And, you know, shock horror here to everyone has mental health. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad, we all have mental health. And I think what's
we forget that, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I know some of us think we're invincible sometimes playing on, but look, it affects everyone. It's affected me big time, and I've had my own journey through it. And, you know, I've lived and breathed this, and I'm always happy to talk about it with people when I'm asked. But I think what we really need is, and we've seen this even in tennis recently, we've seen this at the Olympics, we've seen top athletes speak out about their mental health, and these are top performers at the top of their game. You do not need to suffer in silence. You will not be perceived as weaker, but only, Kevin, can you do this. And only as an athlete when you feel supported. And that's the key thing. We're not going to name names, but 2 years ago, when we first started this and we started speaking with some of the teams and we spoke to RAD, the mental health charity, we got some really interesting insights about how some of the teams were selected, how players felt like they couldn't talk about their mental health in fear of being dropped. When you live and work in a society like that, where you're scared that your position, your livelihood will be based upon you speakingly open about your mental health, I'm not surprised that people don't talk about it. So my call to action is more as an industry, we need to be more open about how we talk about and how we discuss and how do we support individuals who need to talk about their mental health and need that support behind it. So that's my point. I want to talk about the main guys, because you have no idea. Everyone can put on a brave face, Kevin, but you never know what challenges the people are facing. So 100%. Just on the other point as well, LeBron James spends $1.3 million a year in his health and wellness. There's a reason why that man is still at the top of his game. Look at Cristiano Ronaldo as well.
In retrospect, that's such a small number if you think about it. Yeah. Like right, if you think about it in retrospect, because he's pushing $1 billion in market cap and he's making 100 a year. To spend 1/100th on yourself sounds pretty petty, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, he's probably still getting the best of the best.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, economies of scale. Economies of scale. And then you look at like an esports player. That's the frustration, right? Is that 100%. Not all of them make $500,000 a year like League of Legends guys. So why should I spend even $5,000 a year on myself? You know, I'm only making $60K. You know, so that's the stigma that guys like us, that's our job to break.
Yeah, well, I think, Kevin, you've literally said it there, right? You are your biggest asset. This is the way I view myself personally. Anything that I do in terms of my money, if I make an investment in my health and wellness, I've made an investment in my business, my relationships, every other area of my life. By investing in my sleep, by investing in my training, in my wearable, whatever I'm doing, I'm constantly getting better, which means that that's going to filter into all other aspects of my life. So I see it as an investment anytime I invest in my health, well-being, or performance, and it will pay dividends in every other aspect of my life. So.
Look, we're quickly running through this because I did mention offline we would do a really good job speaking in between the slides because there's just so much information. And I wanted to not just have the slides be read. Anybody can read the slides. And I'm sure if anybody wants a copy of this, the team at GScience would be more than happy to give you guys a copy. So we just wanted to get through this, but mainly looking at this last quote of yours and then getting into a couple questions. You know, we develop and support championship winning teams. It's not just a cliche where it says develop and support. We're only as good as the, treatment we give ourselves. this is cliche to say, but when your car, is starting to break down, what do? You go put oil in it, not petrol, like oil, once every 2 years or whatever. When the tires start to get, the tire gets flat. Why do we forget that the body has the same things? I don't replace tires, but I do cut my fingernails. I do shave. I do manage and I do maintain. The one thing we forget, and esports people stop right there. It's that second word in support, right? Is that everybody needs a team in order to be a faker or a ninja or we didn't even touch upon like Nick Merckx, right? Nick Merckx and his massive deal with Under Armour. He got the whole understanding of health and wellness. And look at his support system, going back to your quote right there. He's got 30 people that work for him. And half of them are his training buddies and training people and ex-football friends and wrestlers. And now look at him. He's got the single largest contract and a sponsorship from a sports, which is Under Armour, for an esports athlete. So I know you guys take this to heart. I'm going to stop the slides there and go into a couple questions off the back of your slides. First of all, thank you so much for sharing those with us today. But look, Semper Fortis Esports has been using your services for the last season. And we have a kind of case study we can point back to that really shows how and why esports peak performance training and mental preparation is so important. One of our players, Mr. Archie, who is the youngest Rocket League player in the UK as a professional, must, toot our horn, is that he is the best UK player as well. If I'll let the rankings decide, but he's good. But Mr. Archie has inherent juvenile arthritis issues. He's been diagnosed since 14, 15 years old with juvenile arthritis, and he's a professional Rocket League player. For those who don't know, Rocket League is played with a controller, not a mouse and keyboard. So arguably, some people would say the controller is more strenuous because it's cramping in a certain style with both hands in that position. We were fortunate enough to find GScience, and GScience started working on Archie. Jamie, take us through a little bit about what that looked like from inception to the second that he said, Jamie, I'm feeling better. Give us a quick minute-long life cycle of what that looks like for our listeners.
Yeah, well, I won't go into too much detail because I want to be fair to Archie, but really interesting case with Archie. He's an excellent young lad, and as you said, he's a top performer as well. So you've got a massive asset there, Kevin. But from the inception, Archie obviously, as you said, had some issues with his wrists, which were fairly complicated, and to be honest with you, completely out of my remit anyway. So it was we got in some specialists in order to help with him and make sure that anything that we were doing wasn't aggravating what he had or making his condition worse. So it was really important that we got the right support for that. And then we also looked at other areas of his lifestyle that potentially could be contributing towards the pain he was having, because as you well know, Kevin, we had some issues with regards to taking breaks, and it still wasn't really doing a lot. So we looked at different areas, including his nutrition, which again, a lot of players wouldn't even think about. Like, how can my nutrition be related to the pain in my hands and my wrists and my body? But ensuring that you're fueling your body in the correct way, making sure you're getting enough protein, making sure you're getting the right nutrients is so important to help you recover from playing for like 8 hours a day and holding a controller. So Archie worked with Tristan very closely and they built out a nutrition plan. And I know that was fairly successful. I know he had a few meals that he didn't enjoy, didn't want, but I think it was.
There's only so much you can control 16-year-olds, right? Which again, how many times have you told a gamer stop playing games and they actually stop playing games, Yeah.
And I think the really important thing for Archie that a lot of people can learn from, Kevin, was that, Archie, when we first started with him, his goal was to be the best and to win the championship. And he was like, I really want to do this. Like, I'm fully committed. And then we're like, is your health and lifestyle and everything outside of that, is that aligning with your goals? And he's like, then they start to think. I think telling people, especially at a younger age, is a really bad idea. I think letting them discover that on their own is really, really important. And I think Archie's is getting towards that now. And we looked at his sleep routines as well. We looked at his physical activity level, which again was correlated with how well he was sleeping. He was going to bed at 1 o'clock at night. I'm sure he won't mind me telling, but going to bed at 1 o'clock at night, and we were trying to get.
Not so bad.
Well, yeah, exactly. When it starts to get in the 3 a.m. range, that's when we start to get a little bit worried. But tried to get Archie into the kind of 10 p.m. range, and getting him more active was a really simple thing that a lot of people wouldn't think of, but had a huge benefit for him. And to be honest with you, his hand and wrist is a monitoring process. It's managing it and making sure that he's able to train and play. But for Archie as well, like there's times when, he wasn't playing lots, but he's still performing really well. And I think that's testament to the fact that you don't need to be playing 15 hours a day. You need to be doing it smart, and you need to be doing it, game smart, train hard. That, you need to do it in a way that doesn't impact your physical and mental health. So Archie's a fantastic example, and he's got a really prosperous future ahead of him.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it hits home for us, and it's our Rocket League team, which is a tier 2 esport for those who aren't familiar with the tiers, which means it's not the highest, right? It's not the most expensive, biggest contracts, media deals. So a lot of teams in our league don't think like we do. So we're very fortunate to have a partnership and a company like GScience taking care of the team, because I do feel when you're not an organization with deep pockets or with the best training facilities, as in like maybe we haven't built our own facilities like some of the others. We need to piggyback off of the best things that we can do for the mind, body, and soul, or spirit. And so, Dr. Kate has been amazing for also Archie and team for Semper Fortis, I will say. And Ryan, maybe you can take us a little bit about Dr. Kate and the wonders of how she really brings out the best in the player, but mentally, again, manifesting is something, but not BSing it, and really believing in yourself and telling yourself through your natural abilities. Is it very similar to that sports psychology where you got to be positive, you got to know that practice makes perfect? And like Jamie just said, sometimes you don't need to grind 15 hours a day. Just know you're the best when you grind properly for 8.
Yeah, but Kevin, I'm not even going to start to try to describe Kate's work, because she is phenomenal. She really is. She is at the absolute top of her game when it comes to esports psychology, and she's worked with so many now elite level gamers, and she's always been able to produce results, and it's been incredible to watch her work. But I think just to touch upon the importance of the mental side of gaming, it's huge, absolutely huge. I think that, some of the techniques that Kate uses would be referred to as psychological skills training. So you touched upon a few of them there. Once you've really understood someone's why, and really understood their goals and understood their personality, and, started looking at their triggers as well, and really start to build a bit of a psychological profile on that individual, you can then start to build a framework and roadmap to then helping them achieve their goals. So say, for example, it could be someone who has really bad state anxiety. And state anxiety, for anyone listening, would be, I'm about to step up on the main stage in front of 100,000 live fans, and I'm going to choke on stage because I can't deal with the pressure and anxiety. That would be state anxiety. Kate would work with some players there to help identify that, and then be able to put in strategies to help counteract them effects, such as breathing techniques, to really bring you back down into that parasympathetic state, so you're nice and calm and relaxed. If you're starting to lose your way in game and get tilted, quote unquote, as many gamers do, she helps with trigger words to bring you back into the zone so that you can get focused in the game. But I mean, there's a whole arsenal of an inventory of techniques that can be used around visualization. Kevin, I know you like that a lot. Manifesting the outcome, thinking about what you're doing the next day in terms of your strats, thinking about how you're going to win that game, how you're going to feel, really trying to manifest that into existence. And then I think there's a really interesting part of sports psychology that Kate's specialist in, which is actually to do with communication. I'm sure, Kevin, you'll know this. One of the reasons why teams break up a lot of the time is because of player conflict or coach and player conflict. Kate is an expert in helping players and coaches better understand how to communicate. And that could be about, when is the right time to receive feedback. During a game, when you've just messed something up, I do not need Jamie shouting down the mic, as he usually does to me when we're playing Apex. That was, X, bleep, whatever, right?
Pretty sure it's the other way around.
That's true. But my point being is being able to give effective feedback at the right time can really make or break a relationship. So there's so many different areas, Kevin, that we could cover. But she really is an expert on not only the psychological skills training and that mental health side of things, but also the physiology as well and how they both interconnect.
Right. I'm going to put your contact information for anybody who is interested to learn more about peak performance, health and wellness, nutrition, all things just mind, body, soul, spirit when it pertains to esports and gaming. Yes, again, if you've joined us late, you'll hear the recording, but esports teams have arrived. They are hiring top-level coaches for their mentals off the field. We've just learned today in this wonderful workshop that we just did with GScience about all things health and wellness for esports and really getting the mind right mentally, spiritually, and nutritiously, all things buzzwords as it pertains to the same way you would just take care of your body if you were a professional athlete, if you're a top CEO, if you're a top trader. I know traders in the business world, just putting that cap back on, they take care of their bodies very well because they have some crazy hours, especially if you're trading Asia markets or vice versa in New York and such. So you're always up, but you got to know sleep is a big thing. And I think it's very interesting that companies like yours are doing all of that, all encompassing, as we learned through your team. We're taking care of sleep, we're taking care of the kitchen, we're taking care of the gym, and we're taking care of the mind. And something I'll end on there, Ryan and Jamie, about visualization, manifestation. And we really miss Dr. Kate today, and we can't wait to have her for the next time. But one of my players that just won the League of Legends in the LCS in America, I'm sorry. I've been managing this player, and he said right before the match started, he looks into the camera. I know it's content. I know that these companies do a really good job at taking words and flipping them, but he literally looks into the camera, and the camera guy says, "So how you feeling?" And he said, "We've already won." And they go out and they smash them 3-0 and they won. And then another one of my guys the other day, I was talking to them and our Rocket League team, and I said, what do you think of the game, or what do you think he's like, look, I already know what's going to happen. And that same thing happened. When you say it, and that'll become, right? If you build it, they will come. If you say it, it will become. So I think it's very important to take care of the mentals. Look, Ryan, Jamie, this isn't the last the audience is going to see from our work together, but as well from yourselves. We're really fortunate to have you guys in our corner. Our team is better off with your team than without it. So we appreciate the work that you've done and continue to do for Semper Esports and esports as a whole. Again, look at the contact information there, friends. And thank you for joining this workshop. It was a pleasure again to have Jamie and Ryan from GScience. Take a look at their work that they've done if you've missed us and catched us late. Looking forward, Jamie, to seeing you guys soon. Ryan as well, always a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for having us.
Well, that was a wonderful panel, and definitely we learned a lot about the life of a professional esports player as it pertains to his or her health and wellness regimen.